Joining us today is a living legend, Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and author David Mamet, best known for classic plays like American Buffalo and Glengarry Glen Ross, and movies like The Verdict. He's out now with a brand new book, The Secret Knowledge, on the dismantling of American culture. It's likely to be as controversial as some of his better-known plays. Mr. Mamet, welcome to Newsmax TV.
Thanks for having me.
This book chronicles your journey from unquestioning liberal to staunch conservative. What started you on the trek away from liberalism?
Well, a lot of things. It's like when you get a break in you hear a word once and you've never heard it before, and you hear it 3 more times that same day. I had a bunch of things happen to me over the last few years, and I started to put them all together, and they spelled mother. One of them was I was voting on 2004 at the polling place in the staunchly liberal community in which I live, and there was a feeling of kind of a violence in the air, and they were all nice upper middle class people. I wonder what they felt so violent about. And I got in my car and I drove over to where I was directing this television show I did called The Unit, and I realized that these same Americans who were violent at the polling place were the same ones who work like a dog 16, 18 hours a day and don't know each other's politics. That there were 2 ways of looking at each other, at America. One is that we're deeply divided and we can never get together when we talk about politics, and the other is when we don't talk about politics, we get along better than any people in the history of the world. And I started to seek out the conservative viewpoint because it wasn't that I hadn't been exposed to it, but that I didn't know it existed. Because just like many liberals, we knew that the people on the other side were called Republicans, and we, because we were free-thinking, were called independents. The independents just happened to vote Democrat all the time. So I wanted to become truly independent, so I did a few years' worth of reading and came to a different understanding of economics and philosophy.
Who is the audience for this book? At times you seem to be writing very patiently, as if you're explaining something to a good friend.
Well, I'm trying to explain it to myself. The idea, the wonderful thing, they say if you want to really learn something, teach it, which has been my experience. I've been a teacher since I was a kid. I was teaching college at the age of 21, and I've been teaching in various venues for 40 some years. And to teach, one really has to understand how to present one's case succinctly so that someone else can understand it. Because at some point they lose interest, no matter how correct you may think yourself to be. If you can't explain, like Milton Friedman used to say, people come to me with a doctoral thesis in economics. If the thesis is longer than 500 words, I don't want to read it because the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So what I'm trying to do in the book is help myself as a teacher think through the processes which led to my conversion to conservatism so that I can explain them succinctly.
Do you think you would ever find yourself teaching to a college class this book?
Yes, but I almost got banned from the University of Texas at Austin because I had a deal with them they have my archives there. I had a deal with them to teach for several years, several days a year, and I was going back for the 3rd year of 4 years. But the 2nd year, a student accused me of making a politically insensitive comment and ginned up for my homecoming, the 3rd year, ginned up this mass of feeling against my return, and it called a town meeting of everyone on the Austin campus to determine whether or not I should be allowed to come back and speak. And I thought, well, okay, I've had enough. I know enough. I've visited enough liberal universities in the past. It's gotten beyond a joke, and I have no interest in going back to talk at liberal arts colleges unless they're truly liberal, which is to say, in the classical sense, which is to say, conservative.
Do you think you would have arrived at this point in your thinking, in your conversion, without your very deep religious commitment to Judaism and Israel?
I'm sure that I would not have arrived at this point without that commitment, and there's 2 portions to it, which you, thank you, pointed out. One is a commitment to Israel, when I noticed that inescapably that the left had turned against the state of Israel, and that the Israelis were now being treated as basically as subhumans, that we Jews, with the Israelis and we Jews by extension, were being treated as subhumans by the left. That is to say, people to whom the law, the international law and traditional considerations of right and wrong, traditional considerations of mutual responsibilities to allies did not apply, that all of these could be abrogated by the left because the people involved were Jews and were somehow grasping and criminals. It occurred to me there's no difference between this view and the view that the Jews, the 15th century Jews, the idea that the Jews are going around poisoning the wells and kidnapping the Christian children for their blood. And the only difference is that the left of today is saying it's ridiculous to think that the Jews delight in the killing of Christian children. Of course they don't. They delight in the killing of Muslim children. So to see the left's abandonment of Israel was profoundly sobering. The other part is Judaism, where a more detailed and in-depth study of Musar, which is the Jewish tradition of morality, teaches that one may not discriminate against the poor, but neither can one discriminate against the rich, that the job of the judge is to do justice, suspending both his desire for retribution and his desire to do good, that he has to follow the law, and that's as my understanding of the essence of conservatism. And conservatism got it from the Judeo-Christian society, which is what made America America.
Let's talk a minute more about this. You dealt with a lot of these issues in a book called The Wicked Son. But yet in the United States, Jews are considered a very reliable voting bloc for the left and Democrats in general. Do you see that changing at all?
Well, it's going to change. I believe it's going to change a little bit. Listen, what happened to most of the Jews came here in the late 1880s in the German immigration, and then in the 1920s in the immigration of the Polish Jews who are my people, became what's called Reformed Jews, which is to say they gave up the traditional Orthodox practices of what in Eastern Europe would simply have been called Judaism, in an attempt to simplify and in an attempt to assimilate. But the problem is, if you assimilate enough, you wind up with a bunch of nothing. So Reformed Judaism got to the point where you give up all of the traditional practices of going to shul and worshiping 3 times a day, and of wearing the prayer shawl and wearing the tefillin and keeping kosher. And then they say, well, if those are basically, if they're non-obligatory, what else is non-obligatory? What can we throw away and still have nothing but Judaism? And their answer was, well, good works. It's just going to be good works. That's all Judaism is. It's dedicated to good works. So you got a bunch of people who are dedicated to nothing but good works, but you don't have to be a Jew to be dedicated to good works. I mean, any moral person is going to be dedicated to good works and the 10 Commandments. So you got a bunch of Jews who they have this residual thing called Judaism. They don't know what it is, and it doesn't give them much pleasure because it's, Reformed Judaism is like taking a bath with your socks on. You can't. How do you take any pride in it? One goes to it as, largely, there are some exceptions, but largely as if a trip to the dentist because it's good for you. So if one is dedicated above all to good works, and the herd says that would be the Democratic Party, one votes Democratic, and it takes a great effort for these Jews who are now third-generation congenital Democrats to examine what are the good works proposed, are they actually taking place, and at what cost. It takes a great effort, because it feels like two things, because it feels like treason, and it feels like heresy.
I see. Let's talk a little bit more about some recent good works on the part of the Obama administration. President Obama recently gave a very controversial speech on Israel's borders, saying that Israel has to do more for peace. What did you think of that speech, and what's your general opinion of your fellow Chicagoan, Barack Obama?
Well, I actually am a real Chicagoan. I was born in Hyde Park, where he went later on in life. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I actually can pronounce the name of the White Sox baseball field. And I grew up in the era of Saul Alinsky. My parents knew people who worked with and for Saul Alinsky, the neighborhood organizer from whom Barack Obama has gotten his theories of community organizing, or we used to call it a shakedown, which is what it is. It's saying, if you read Saul Alinsky's books, Reveille for Radicals and the other early book, etc. And Jesse Jackson was doing the same thing with his Operation Push, and one understood that these people, under the name of good works, were trying to intimidate and shame others into giving them money to which they could use for purposes which were basically unaccountable. So that's where Barack Obama comes from. He's also part of the great tradition of other people who never worked a day in his life. For example, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, who believed them. It was the vision of the anointed, as Hayek said. It's the vision of the anointed, that they know that they've somehow been anointed, that they know better than everyone else around them. So one of the things that Obama and his administration know better than everyone else around them is that Israel is in the wrong, and that the way to peace, crazily, after 60 years of Israel trying to meet the demands of various Arab constituencies, is to give them back more land. When every time Israel has given back land, the Arabs use that to stage new attacks on Israel. To continue in this, to turn our back on our ally, for the President of the United States to turn his back on our traditional ally is, it's heartbreaking. And I think it's time for the Jews to wake up. The other thing I'd like to say is that Israel has been fighting the battles of the West for 60 years. That the men and women in Israel, both in the armed forces and in the civilians, have been fighting and dying to preserve the Judeo-Christian ethic and to preserve liberty in the Mideast for 60 years. They've been under a constant attack, and they're under a constant attack now. Whatever happens to Israel is going to happen to America. And as it says in the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed by me, and those who curse Israel will be cursed by me. The record of the last 2,000 years has proved that to be true, and it will be proved to be true in the future. I heard his speech, and I read Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, and I said to myself, why can't we, America, have a leader like Netanyahu? Because we sure as hell need one.
You've written this book. We're entering a presidential election year. Are you looking to become more active in politics, perhaps even backing or endorsing a candidate this year?
I'm not looking to become more active in politics. I think and I certainly don't want to endorse a candidate. I mean, I don't know better than the next guy. I think that the lesson is, my lesson is that the three branches of government, having failed to uphold the Constitution, and the press having failed to uphold its responsibility to tell the truth, there's nobody home but us chickens. And us chickens are the votership, and we citizens are going to have to make up our minds and vote according to our understanding of our responsibilities. And that the American citizens are no less equipped than I to make that distinction.
Again, the book is The Secret Knowledge on the Dismantling of American Culture. Mr. Mamet, thank you so much for speaking with us.
You're very welcome.